Okay, welcome to another episode of the Aspen Roots podcast. We're here with our good friend Marianne out of Dillon, Colorado. Welcome to the podcast, Marianne.
Thank
you for
you.
being here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Marianne is a massage therapist and an inner wellness mentor. Did I say that right?
No, inner wellness.
Inner.
So we all have ideas of what wellness is, right? And it's different for everyone. And just having gone through all of the learning that I've done, I don't have a specific program or protocol that I use, but I'm just able to be with people and create the space for them to tap back into that wellness if they're off.
Cool.
That
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you do that through talk therapy or?
Yeah, sometimes body, sometimes, it's kind of, and a lot of it is somatic experiencing. So
Okay.
with the body. So it is starting with talking and then going into feeling it in your body and see what is there.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So if you're new here to the Aspen Roots podcast, we like to tell spiritual stories, whatever that means, because everything is spiritual as far as I'm concerned. But we try to tell some mind-blowing stories. So today we're going to talk to you about the ability to sense entities and getting to know one's self.
So yeah, let's define entity before we move forward.
Yeah, good point. So how would you guys define entities?
Marianne, you go first.
For me, I think of an entity as an energy that is different than what is normal in your surroundings, wherever you are. And some people see them, some people hear them, some people feel them, but it's not really a defined kind of thing broadly. Although you probably could go to the dictionary and find out what an entity is.
Yeah.
So since you're giving us your view and we're talking today about your experience with it, the stories that we'll be telling, what are these entities defined as?
It's an energy, and I want to say a mass or a concentration of energy that I feel that is different than what I have felt before when I'm in that same situation. For example, if I walk into a room and it normally it feels great, or it feels like not great, that not a really good definer, but it feels like a room that has no charge to it, I guess. And then if I walk into that same room and all of a sudden I go, wow, I'm feeling like something is here. Like I can feel there's a difference between what it is normally for me and what it is that day.
And how would you know that it's not just like your emotions? Like you came in sad because you had a sad dream and last time you were happy.
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times, even though I sense it by feeling, a lot of times there is a visual, like maybe a shadow or something off to the side. But if I look at it, it goes away. I don't see it.
Okay.
And so when you say like something different or energy, do you believe that it's one being or like a group of beings or an energy conglomerate? All of those things, would that all fall into like the same category as saying entity?
Yeah, it could be all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. How would you define entities, Sophia?
Entities for me are usually a lower vibrational being. Mm-hmm. Although as we talk about this subject, it's opening my mind to a more broader category. But for me, historically, it's a lower vibrational being without a physical body and kind of lost, it seems. They are out in either nature or in my home or trying to attach to me. So someone who is lost in some way or is somewhere they don't feel home and they don't feel safe. There's something wrong with them.
So why would they want to attach to you?
Well, from my personal experience, I feel like I have a light that I carry, and that's not 100% of the time, but this light often attracts beings that are a lower vibration that are attracted to something brighter than them, and they're curious about it and also maybe looking to move on from the physical world and go to back home, wherever home is.
Okay, so I'm finding this conversation extremely interesting. We started to have it before we hit the record button, and I realized we all have like wildly different perspectives. So I was like, let's get this on the podcast. And so for me, it's a consciousness that has its own free will without a physical body. To me, it's not necessarily a lower vibration or something that necessarily needs to attach. To me, my lost loved ones are now entities if they come here, or angels can be an entity if they come here. And I say having your own free will because there's also, as Barbara Brennan would call them, psychonoetic like thought forms in the astral without any physicality. So that's just like perspectives and thoughts and emotions, and these are just charges of energies that affect us and are around us and we can connect with and they can connect with us, but they don't necessarily have free will. They just are what they are. A lot of them are created by us, so that's different than entities because entities are something with a soul and free will, like I've said. So I'm sure you guys have your own definitions or agree more with different things we've each said here, but for this podcast, it's only really going to matter what Marianne says because these are her stories. And you guys will get the vibe anyways. English language is limited and each word is only a sound that has a meaning that we give it. So you'll just pick it up on the context here. But take us to the beginning of when you first learned about entities and then learned that you could connect with them, and just the beginning of your story here.
Okay, I would say the first time was probably, other than, walking into a room and noticing energy, like if someone's angry or there was a fight or something like that. But to have an entity with a possibility of a consciousness, for example, I would say I was leading a sweat lodge and the shaman came up to me afterwards in the parking lot and said, "Hey, Archangel Michael wants to have a relationship with you."
Nice.
And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I knew I was going to find out. And so...
Were you curious?
Oh, yeah. I was like...
Were you excited?
What does that mean?
Were you resistant and scared at all? Or
I wasn't scared because the feeling that I had from Archangel Michael was very benevolent. Cool. So not really a scary guy, that kind of thing.
His sword didn't scare you?
No. No, because I guess he uses it for good.
Yeah, right? To defeat the darkness.
Exactly. Okay, so the shaman tells you that Archangel Michael has told him this, and what happened next?
So the shaman is also a teacher, a mentor, a guide, spiritual guide, and all that. So I was having a session with him a couple days later, a week later. And so what we were doing when we were sitting there was, I asked him, I said, "So what does that mean? What's encompassed in that?" And he inquired the same way as you are. How do you feel energies? What is it like? Is there a personality? Is there, is it just a blob? Is it whatever? And so then I said, but, I only know Archangel Michael from the little cards that we have. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you can use those cards or a statue or some kind of an image of a person that you want to connect with during a meditation. So I had done that in the past, but I had never really had the experience of calling in an angel or calling in a specific energy or entity and saying, what does it feel like? What is it like to me? Now the shaman, he did that all the time. So he said, okay, I called in Archangel Michael. He's here now. What is different between when you first sat down and now? Do you feel that? And I was like, yeah, I do feel it. And he's like, what are you feeling? And for me, even though I don't really visualize, I felt blue. It felt like a blue color. And he said, okay, so if you were to call in Archangel Michael, and we spent time with it, with the energy, with the feeling, all that. And towards the end, he said, if you were to call in Archangel Michael, how would you know that he arrived? And knowing that he has a sword, I was like, well, he would just whoosh, and there would be a sound, and it would be whoosh. And so he goes, okay, so whoosh and blue. That's how you know when Archangel Michael comes in. And it was interesting because at that time, I felt that whoosh, and I felt the blue. And so I kind of anchored that into my perception. So that's how it's been. And that's how I work with entities, that if I want some assistance and I want to ask for some help, whether it's a guardian angel or whether it's someone who passed on before, an ascended master, or someone who is really smart and has the notion that I want right now, or the ideas. If I were to call in Einstein, what would that feel like? Einstein, I really don't understand this teaching. Could you help me out with it? That kind of thing. And you could say it's a lot of imagination, and it might be, but there's also a sensing and a feeling to it, and experiential.
So in one of our earlier episodes, Sophia and I talked about the psychic senses, and it sounds like you're talking about direct knowing. It's like you just have this knowing that he's blue, rather than seeing it or knowing that he's here.
And there's also a mixture of the senses, which Barbara Brennan talks about, like feeling a color, you were saying. And,
right.
Or you might smell a color, and combining those senses, it doesn't have to be one or another.
Right, but it sounds like your main one is direct knowing, right?
Yeah, intuition, feeling, that kind of sensing is how I know.
Okay, so I have a couple questions at this point. One is, what was your confidence level during or right after that first session? And how did your confidence progress? And what kind of timeline are we talking here?
Oh, that's a good question, because it was a while ago. Confidence level then wasn't huge. It wasn't stellar. It was, I think I felt it.
Okay.
I think I knew it. Yeah. And then I kind of just like, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
And then the more I would do a meditation with that card or with other cards, and I would imagine what they would feel like or how they would come into my field, then it grew. It grows with experience, for sure. And doing it on a regular basis, daily if you can, but it also, if it's just every now and then, even, like once a week or so.
Okay.
It grows. Yeah,
and you guys will see here in just a minute, Marianne's ability to sense these things has been validated through some of the stories that she's going to tell here. But I have one other question. Do you ever call in these entities? And so we're calling Archangel Michael in this case an entity, right?
Yes.
Okay, so do you ever call in some entity and they don't show up? Like, I called for them, I'm not feeling anything.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I guess what I take away from that is I need to figure this out on my own, or
they're busy.
Or they're busy, or maybe someone else has the answer, or what.
I like that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be just because I want this one to tell me the answer, or whatever I'm going through to give me clarity or shed a light on it. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be from anywhere.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's jump into your first story here.
Okay. So I was in Hawaii doing a training, and we had roommates. And there was this woman who was my roommate, and I sensed around her an entity, a negative kind of energy that was very clingy, and it wasn't, I guess it could have been inside of her at times, but I kind of saw it around. And you can talk to, with all this experience of calling them in and asking them what you want, or, please illuminate me on this idea or what. You talk to them. And so I talked to this one and I said, why are you bothering her? Come on, leave her alone.
And let me just ask you real quick, how much experience did you have at this point? How long was this after that first session that you were just telling us
Might have been 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was like, this one was kind of mischievous, kind of like taunting, like, oh, well, how about I go with you?
And what did you say?
And I was like, no, how about you just go?
Nice.
And so ended up that I was like, fine, if you want to, go ahead, come with me.
So you gave her permission. How do you decide to all of a sudden give her permission after saying, no, go?
Because I really felt it was the best thing for all. It was the best thing for this woman for sure. And for me, because I was aware of it, it wasn't going to hurt me. It wasn't going to be detrimental to me. Mm-hmm. As well as that, I knew that when I was going home to Colorado, that I was going to go into a healing ceremony. And a lot of times the shaman would be taking entities from the body or the aura or stuff like that. And we invited in a lot of entities to hold space around us while we were doing the ceremonies. And so I knew that if this entity, I call it a he, wanted to hitch a ride with me, it would be okay. Because what we did during the healing ceremonies was that we would release them from this body or this aura and let them go up to what we would call the light, or up to an archangel that was helping them to leave this world.
So once you noticed this entity and then invited it to come with you, how did it present? How did you notice this entity around you?
For me, it was kind of here, off to my right shoulder, maybe a little bit where it could whisper into my ear, but it never did. It was kind of off to the side and behind me. And it was off the right shoulder. And so it was pretty much just there, not really, tapping on me or trying to bother me. It was just kind of like hanging on, I guess hitchhiking.
Along for the ride.
Yeah, along for the ride.
Did you guys commune? Did you have conversations?
No, I didn't. I didn't really, because I thought it was, I don't want him to be there. Okay, yeah. Like, I'd rather be free, and at least you're not with her anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us what happened when you got to the healing ceremony.
Yeah. So when I got back, it was my turn to lay down, and everybody was around me. I didn't tell the shaman that I felt like this hitchhiker was here. And I figured that he would be able to feel it as well as the other people in the circle. And so afterwards, he definitely said, yeah, there was an entity, but it wasn't inside of you. It wasn't in your body. It was outside of you. And it was pretty new, pretty recent.
Wow.
He said it wasn't something from childhood. It was something that you kind of picked up maybe in your travels.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think verification, that's the best part of the story, in my opinion.
Totally.
Yeah.
So 2 to 3 years into it, and you get this really profound verification. That must have really boosted your confidence and your ability to sense these things.
It kind of makes you feel like, whoa, I'm not imagining it.
Yeah, exactly.
This really is.
Yeah.
It's real.
I feel like those confirmations are really important, especially in the beginning part of our journeys. They help us believe in ourselves.
Yeah. And it's, what is real, right?
Yes. What is real? That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
More than just the physical reality.
So having done these healing ceremonies, both Sophia and I, with Marianne in the past, I know that the shaman would put this geometric shape. Do you know what the shape was?
Cube octahedron, yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
That had this opening at the top that these entities could go up and out and back to the light and not be these in between, like wayward souls, as some people call them. So there's a really good example of this again in your next story, right?
Yeah. In those ceremonies, he would, a lot of people call it cast the circle or cast the octahedron, and put different angels, archangels, in various directions. So Michael was always in the north, and in the south was Gabriel and all of that. So there was a Krazel was up in the ceiling, for us it was the ceiling. And so a couple years later, God, it must have been almost 8 years later,
Oh, wow.
I was going to Chicago for a retreat, and one of my classmates was a shaman from a totally different lineage. And she was Vietnamese by birth. Her grandfather was a shaman, but she also learned some Latin American shamanism. And so we got there a day early, went to Whole Foods, got our food. We go back to the condo, and we're just making dinner. And we're sitting down to eat dinner. And I said, so what do you think about this guy? Because once again, this is where I felt it. Like there was something that when I left Colorado, I didn't have this, but now all of a sudden in Chicago, I did. And I was like, do you see this? And she's sitting across from me, and she said, yeah.
And for those of you who aren't watching the video and just listening, she's again pointing to right behind your right shoulder, kind of on the outside of your auric field, right?
Correct. And she said, yeah, I see it, but not to worry because it's not harmful.
And is that how you felt?
Yeah, I felt the same way. And I said, yeah, I know. I must have picked it up at the airport. I just guessed, you know. And I thought she might want to do some kind of a ceremony or something, but she wasn't, we were eating. She wasn't really interested in that. So the next day we go to the workshop, and it was some teaching in the beginning in the morning. And then we got on the tables and we did the meditation. And it was a big old warehouse type of building. And the skylights were on the ceiling, but it was a pointed kind of ceiling. And I was on the table and looking up, and we went through the meditation. And when I got off the table, I kind of took a check and I looked, and I didn't feel that entity anymore on my right shoulder. So I kind of glanced up to the top to see where a crazial would be in our healing ceremonies. And I saw that entity saying, thanks, and thumbs up and waving goodbye to me, and I was like, oh, that's all it wanted. It really just wanted to your point, have a different vibration, go up to the light or go up to whatever it was. And they were done with it here, but they just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was neat.
So that reminds me of a story that Sophia and I had recently on a road trip in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. We had been hiking around a ghost town, maybe not a ghost town, but a part of the woods where a town used to exist doesn't anymore. You can see some of the old stone structures and stuff. I don't know if that's necessarily relevant, but it's going to toss that in here anyways. And so a night or two later, our truck broke down. We had been sleeping in our camper. So now the truck is at the shop and we're staying in our friend's house. And I'm awake since 1:30 in the morning, just scrolling through YouTube, trying to figure out how to fix the truck. Sophia and Rossi are sleeping. And at one point, Rossi just looks up in the corner of the room and is just barking into the air. And we both are just kind of like, Rossi, shh. Rossi, shh, be quiet. And he did, and everything, I'm back on YouTube scrolling, and not too long later, Sophia, you can tell she's sleeping because of her heavy breathing. She just starts going, and I calmly look at her, and I'm like, what was that about? And she's like, I was trying to tell you it wasn't me. Something paralyzed me and came over me and was using my voice. So do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, so I was asleep, and this happens pretty frequently, at least a few times every other month, I would say, where I'm sleeping and there's an astral being around me, or an entity that either wants to have a conversation or more with me. And so this being that day tried to use my voice, wanted to talk to you. I felt like it was a female entity, and she wanted to relate to you. And so that was the first thing, is she came into my body to use my voice, and then she came over my heart. And from there, I was really fighting as hard as I could to push this entity off of me. And I knew I had to wake up in the dream to be able to claim my body. And so I was trying my hardest to wake up. And so when I did, I realized, exactly, I knew what was going on, that it was standing off to my right. And, it was a lot of emotion running through me at the time.
Because you were kind of pissed. You were like, "Get out of my body!"
Yes,
this is mine. Get out of here.
I mean, yeah, I think the stories that Marianne has told us have been benign beings that are staying on the outside of her field.
Yeah. Well, I still think this is a benign being, and I never had the impression that this was anything necessarily dark or mean or had bad intentions. And if you remember, you got your guides told you in the form of song lyrics.
Yes.
Essentially that.
So my guides told me that they were attracted to my light quotient, essentially, which is something Boot Gordon speaks about. That was a few podcasts ago. You guys want to check that out. And it was just attracted to my light. So it wanted to experience me and my light, but it also wanted to come into my body, which I thought was an invasion.
Yeah. So we did, this is kind of standard operating procedure for us around here. So we just went through the motions of clearing it. We called on the Christ consciousness from within us, and we claimed our space by echoing our name around us and into our body, and told it to leave, and commanded, not just asked it nicely, but command from the heart, which is something my guides taught me in a dream. They showed me when entity is attached. I can't be like, "Excuse me, Mr. Entity, can you please get off of me? I need to command from my heart to leave." Yeah. And so we were doing that at 1:30 in the morning and cleared the space, and Sophia went back to sleep, and everything was good after that, right?
Yeah, everything was good after that. Next time we'll be more attentive to what Rossi has to say, our dog in the room. So, and kind of take action then before things get to that level. And I just want to reflect on paralysis in dreams and this feeling of the tailbone fluttering. That was something else I had, where it's just this primal fear. That happens a lot in my dream state. And so if there's listeners out there that this is happening to, if you're able to have intrinsic awareness in your dreams and wake up and claim your body, you can even say your name 360 degrees, or out loud to really claim your space. But I think this is something that other people experience for sure, that they may not be aware of why they're having these dreams of paralysis or just kind of being taken over, or what to do about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that reminds me of the lady from your first story where she wasn't aware this entity was around. And I really believe that this is a phenomenon that happens to probably all of us. And so if there's entities around and you're not aware of it, it could look so different depending on the entity. If it's an entity who's very fearful and feeds off of fear, they might push you into fearful thoughts and perspectives to get you to emanate that energy that they want to be in. And that's just, that's an extreme example. There could be totally just curious ones that are just hanging out. It sounds like some of yours were. And you guys got any other examples about what people who aren't sensing them yet might expect? You were talking about that lady talking a lot.
Yeah. I think sometimes it is, like you said, energy, where you kind of take on the energy of the entity.
Right.
And I think other people will say, well, what's going on? You're not acting like yourself, And if someone says that to you, then that might be an indication that you got to step back and say, what's going on here?
And I feel like it's something that can be shifted. Maybe you've just been in a bad mood for a long time, but that's something that can shift. And when it does shift, that being may move on from you, or it doesn't have the hold on you anymore that it did. And so its power is lessened. So it's not like, these are things are always going to be. You can shift them with your consciousness, with, if you go and have a really happy experience somewhere and shift that energy. I feel like sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So what Marianne was just saying, that happened to me similar to your first story, where I was on a sailboat and I woke up and I was completely paralyzed, like Sophia was talking about, for, I don't know, it felt like 30 seconds, could have been shorter, but that was the end of that. And I didn't put two and two together, but a week later I was at one of those healing ceremonies with the same shaman, and he's like, you had this entity, you picked it up from the ocean.
Yeah.
And as soon as you got here, something was off. The words that you were saying, it didn't sound like you. And I didn't have this level of self-observation to notice that and put two and two together back then, but the ability has grown. And if I was to give any one simple tip about how to begin to notice these things for yourself, it'd be to go to the heart. The heart is the gateway to the dimension of the astral plane, and that's where a lot of these, if not all of these entities are residing. So if you can go to the vibration of your heart and notice that whole vibration all around you and just be there with your awareness, you might start to pick up on this stuff more.
And that's the same dimension we go into, the astral, when we dream. So that makes perfect sense of why these beings are there, why they're very real in this dimension and not so much in our waking life. We're in the third dimension when we're awake for the most part.
So, we're talking a little bit about how they might affect your thoughts and, voices in your head, which is a great transition point to move into getting to know thyself, which is the other component of this podcast episode here today.
Yeah, knowing yourself is huge. I mean, it's key. We've learned before that if you're not aware, you can't make a choice. If you're not aware of what's going on within you and what's going on around you, you have no choice. And so that's where I think a lot of people get in our common society is that they get stuck.
And so when you say you have no choice, you refer to like emotional reactions or just a belief system that this person grew up with, and so that's the choice they're making kind of thing?
I was thinking the choice of clearing it.
Yeah, both of them. I think both of them. It's because you're on autopilot.
Yeah, on autopilot. Right? That's a great way to say it.
And if you don't really realize that this is not me, this is not who I am, well, you don't even know who you are. Mm-hmm. So you have to have that observation, the self-reflection, which is something that humans have and other animals and beings on this planet don't. So it's that thing of, the more aware I am of myself and my surroundings, but also who am I? Who is this person that is doing massage therapy and an inner wellness mentor, and who's this person doing the energetic healing that you guys are doing, and who is this person who lives in Dillon, Colorado, or in other places, traveling to Hawaii and all that. And once you are aware of who you really are, then you can really move through life, and it's so much more pleasurable. And when I say, who are you, I don't think it's one thing. It's not just me, the person who's earning my living as doing this,
Multidimensional.
Yeah.
Definition of it, yeah.
And that's a person that is, I would call the thinker or the doer, the one who's in this three-dimensional realm, if you want to call it that. But deep inside and through the heart, you can get to know this other one. A lot of people have called it the soul. A lot of people have called it the observer. That one is different and would totally, if we were to allow that one, if we chose to allow that one to infuse what we're doing in this world, we might do differently. Mm-hmm. We might think differently. And then I think there's that part of us that is the divine, that spark within us that is part of the divine, that is, as scientists would say, is the definition of energy. It's never been created, it cannot be destroyed. I think that's within each one of us, is that one that lives forever and never had a beginning and never had an ending. And that's how that one interacts with us who is making the money for today. That's the knowing of the self. And how about that other, that is the soul. And I think of the soul or the observer kind of the way that Eckhart Tolle had said in his book, The New Earth, was that it kind of can put a space around. So like if you're going through a painful situation or a situation you don't want to be in, but you have to be there for whatever obligation you have, it's like this observer can observe it from not being in it and be that you can almost put a space around it. Mm-hmm. And so having that space around it allows you not to really suffer whatever experience that you're having. It allows you to make a choice because now you're aware this is what I'm doing, and I'm doing it because of very good reasons, but I might have a choice to do something else, or I might have a choice at least to perceive it differently and not to suffer with it. Yeah, it hurts. It's painful. Or it's really joyous, but at any time, that is something that is not the whole experience of who we are.
So, you've been on this path for a while doing this work, and you're talking about something right now that I call intrinsic awareness. It's a term I got from Tom Kenyon, and it's the observer self, the one who's not in the emotions and in the thoughts, just watching the part of you that's having the emotions and the thoughts. And when you can be aware that you have that perspective, it gives you a bigger perspective on the whole situation. And when you start to just put your attention there, that's all it takes. You put your attention into that, you grow it. It grows. And the more you grow it, the more you use it in your life, and it starts to bleed into your dream world. And so for me, having done this for the amount of time that I have that observer self in my dreams. And sometimes something will happen in my dream and I'm interpreting it as it happens. Like, oh, this is probably what that part of the dream means. And sometimes something's so important, I'll be like, oh, I need to remember this. And I snap back to waking reality so I can write it down and then go back into the
That's
dream
really
world.
good. How long did that take you to practice?
I've been working on it to some degree for roughly 20 years now.
Wow.
But it comes with intention. I feel like mine didn't take that long.
Yeah.
Probably over the course of about 3 years. So it just depends where you're at, what you're doing in your life, what you're eating, I believe, has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah.
So how clean you are, how clean of a vessel, so these messages can come through.
So you were telling me about you kind of pieced all this together on a treadmill one day.
Yeah. Yeah, I was on the elliptical because the weather was really lousy outside. And the rec center that I go to has a track going around it and a bunch of machines, treadmills, ellipticals, rowing machines. They've got all of those right in this one area. And it's pretty busy, so I like to listen to YouTubes or podcasts or something like that while I'm on the elliptical. And there was one teacher that we all listened to quite a bit and learned quite a bit from. His name is Muji. And he has kind of based his whole work on this finding or feeling that observer and the seer, the one that's behind that. So I'm on the elliptical and I see this and it's a Muji and I'm just like, I don't want to listen to this. So here's that voice in my head and I'm like, oh, really? The other voice says, oh, really? Like, you really like this teacher, right? You respect him. And I was like, yeah, I do. All right, well, why do you think this is not going to be worth a listen to today? And I was like, well, because I've done it before and nothing ever happens and this and that. And I was like, okay, well, if that's the way you want to be, it's not on him. It's you. And so then I had to be, all right, you got me. I took full responsibility. I said, okay, we'll listen to it. So I'm on there, and because it's so busy around me, I close my eyes, but I'm holding on so I can still do that. And the whole process is to leave everything behind you, or this way, either way. You walk into someone's house, you take off your shoes, right? Okay, well, while you're there, also leave your purse. While you're there, also leave your jacket. While you're there, also leave. And it gets down to the place where there's just you. And who is that? And leave all your calendar and your schedule and all of that behind you. And what's left? And it's this observer. And so I'm closed eyes and I'm just like, yeah, I feel that. I know, that's the observer. I know this one. I've known it always. It's always been there. And then he takes a step back and he says, okay, now behind that, who sees the observer.
So like the observer of the observer.
Yes.
And is there an observer of the observer of the observer?
I don't know. I haven't gotten there.
Okay.
But it's the seer. He calls it the seer. And his question is, can that seer be seen? And he never quite answers that. He never quite answers about the observer either. But it's easy, I think, for most people to feel that observer. The seer, once again, was like, yeah, it's, of course, it's always been there. Yes, I have the seer, and yes, I have the observer. And yes, I have this one that is on the elliptical. And I wonder, what if I open my eyes? Is it going to all go away? Like poof. And so I open one eye, and I'm doing this, and I see the guys running around the track, or women walking, or guys and girls, they're all walking and running. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's so-and-so. I wonder how the kids are, Oh yeah, there's this and that. And then other people on different machines, and I'm going, wow, they're really working hard, or something like that. And I'm like, would that take me away from my observer? Because I knew that was what a lot of people say in meditation is called monkey mind. Mm-hmm. I knew that was going to come in, and I was like, I still am the observer. I still know there's someone seeing these people and interacting with them if I were to wave or whatever. And yet that still is not the only one that's me. Hmm. And I was like, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
So it sounds like you kind of are moving into awareness of all of it rather than just one or the other.
Right.
Just the one who's having the experience.
Correct. So it's like simultaneous, all at once, And that was 2016. And for a long time, so I kind of walked through my days or went through whatever I was doing, and like, okay, I've got the observer, I've got the doer, I've got the seer, all right. And a lot of times I would get conflicting messages. And I'm like, well, who do I listen to?
That's a great question.
Who's in charge, Who's driving the bus? And I didn't know the answer to that. I never found that answer. I joined a course that was a 1-year-long course through the New Human University called Praxis Aletheia. And they practice a type of meditation, then also 9 summits of transformation. And in these first 3 summits is exactly that. There is an awareness of the observer, and he calls it the soul. And then the next one is awareness of the transcendent self, which would be the seer. And then the third one put it all together and said, but you in this world are the unitary being. You are all of that. And that one is the one who experiences the world in this 3D body, physical body, but also can put space around it. And also, it's like,
observe that all of that is happening.
Forever. Never born, never dies. And it's like, wow. And that's a lot of people will say that's love. That's the divine spark. That's the Godhead within you. And it's all of that. And once I got to that point, I was like, oh, everybody's driving the bus.
So to you, knowing thyself means encompassing all of that.
Yeah. Because if you know all that, you're, like I had a meeting today and the guy said, well, I still got to work on it. I was late to the meeting and I got upset with myself and I'm driving and then I couldn't answer the phone when you called me to see where I was and all of this. And that's what I've got to work on. And I was like, yeah. And when you're there, when you have all those 3 people, you can kind of ask yourself the question, who's getting upset? Mm-hmm. Who's that one that's getting upset? And who's that one that is just watching it? And who's the one who never gets upset?
And so there's benefit in asking that, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're not asking that, you're probably stuck in one of those dimensions. So just simply posing the question invites you to a different perspective, which shows you have other choices you can make.
Right, exactly. And it's not who's asking that, like now I've got to go into this analytical space. No, it's a simple question. Who's asking that? Who's doing that? Who wants this or that? And then you make your choice.
I love it. And so this was a big aha for you, obviously. And so so now you use this awareness as you walk through life, right?
Right. And when I help people,
Okay.
there was another clinical psychologist that I came across on YouTube named Dr. Richard Miller. And he was addressing an audience and he said, this is a meditation I do with everyone, because if I don't, I feel like as a clinical psychologist, I'm performing malpractice. And that meditation was getting to know the self. And he's like, until you get to know the self, any other work that we do on the thinking level in particular is incomplete.
So, I'm really feeling into this, and it's kind of like the seers or observers. I'm getting lost in the terms, but like the ones watching all this, or even the one creating space, they kind of have an all-encompassing viewpoint, whereas the one here, what would you call that? The doer?
The doer, the thinker.
The doer, you start to notice patterns, right? And is this where we start to see like our habitual fears that maybe we've carried since childhood and picked up from our parents or other authority figures, and you start to see patterns. And once you can observe those patterns for what they are, then you can really begin to change some long-seated behavioral or emotional or whatever energetic.
And that's a place to start, right? I mean, that's who we know most intimately, is the person that goes out to the job, the person who has family parties. That's the one that has to cope with all of the triggers or all of the people who do that. So yes, that's a very vital part of the journey, the individual journey, but it's not the only one.
Right.
When you work with someone, you want to make sure that you're really being able to broaden out. It's not just about, well, this triggers me and what do I do to cope with it or to manage it or to change it? It's more than that. And that exploration it's the best ride.
It's an adventure.
Yeah, it's never ending.
Yep.
And it's so worth it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It adds more power to the journey, I think.
Yeah,
It's kind of
I
how
agree.
I feel into it. So again, thinking into all this, it's like the doer, it feels like there's a lot of programs in there. And so the programs are limited. And when I'm thinking about when we are on our healing table working with our clients, you really got to leave that part of yourself out of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not programmed enough to know every possible thing that could be going on with my client. So I got to leave that part completely out. Like you were talking about leaving the purse and all that behind. Leave that out and just observe the client in that way. Yeah. And not from my doer program self, but more like my anything's possible and I don't even know what might be going on here, and I just listen and see what comes through. And that's a vital part of doing our healings, I think, too.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. For me, my observer self comes through most in the dream world. I've been able to know I'm dreaming most of the time, or wake up from a dream and be like, oh, that's why things were different, because the dream is so real. But I have a few examples where I've woken up in a dream and the scenery is different, and I'm like, oh, you're dreaming, just go back to sleep. Or as I talked about earlier, knowing that I need to wake up if there's a being, an entity that's trying to overcome my body, and I know that I'm dreaming, so I need to then wake up to claim my space or just get back into my body.
So is that knower, is that the observer,
I feel like it's the observer who comes through most often in my dream state.
So I can't say with certainty, but that's like a hint that even after we die, we're going to have this kind of dynamic of knowing ourselves and moving forward in our journey, even without the physical body.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about.
And there's also dreams within dreams, so that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those happen quite often for me. And, yeah, there's just different...
You have a dream where you're dreaming a dream?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah. I wake up into one reality, which is still the dream.
You're like, oh, that was just a dream, but you're still in a dream.
Yeah. And then I wake up to the physical reality here.
Like they were both dreams.
Wow.
3 layers. Yeah, so there's a lot of depth to all this stuff.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. Play with it in your own life and see what comes to you. I think it's fun.
Yep.
So
This is the conversation worth having.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
For sure.
for sure. So with that said, let's move into our soulful
send-off.
send-off.
Yes. Is there anything you want to say, Marianne, from your heart that kind of sums up what we've talked about today, or just anything that's coming to you?
Yeah, just to echo the ancient Greeks, right? Know thyself. For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. For me, from my heart, for the soulful send-off, I want to say to actually play with this. Don't make it so serious and stress about it and start judging yourself or judging others even, and making this a scary thing or something you have to do, or you have to go to the observer self and you're wrong if you forgot that part and got caught up in details. Just play with it. It's all an adventure. It's, if you haven't been doing it yet, it's always been an option, and you're not wrong for having done it, and you're not wrong if you start doing it one way or another, and just have fun with it.
Nice.
Good point. Yep.
For me, I think it's just about opening up to greater realities, and what does that look like for each individual person, and just greater ways of being, greater ways of relating to yourself and others, and that's always changing. So just learning as we go in life, and experiencing what's there in the present that maybe wasn't there yesterday or the day before.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Thank you.
We want
Thank
to plug
you.
Marianne's massage therapy business, which is For Body Wellness. Is that right?
www.4bwell.com.
And
So
that's the
4
number.
is the number,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
spelled out. And
BWELL.
Okay.
it's in Dillon, Colorado, and we know many of you might end up here on a ski vacation someday, so search out Marianne, grab a massage, and
And your counseling services that you do?
It's all on the website.
All on the website. Okay, great.
cool. Thanks again for being here.
Thank
Love you
you.
very much.
Yes.
Aw,
Appreciate
group
it.
hug.
Oh, group hug.
Yes. Every week, we share our most recent divine guidance in an audio recording called Oracle Offerings. Sign up for only $5 a month at patreon.com/AspenRoots.